Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Senator Bob Guida from District 2 in Warren, where the temperature this morning when I awakened was a warm 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Today we'll be holding a meeting of Senate Ways and Means Committee. Before we get started, I'd like to read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we're holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with that order, I'm confirming that we're providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We're utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting, and all members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website at nh.gov. We're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has such a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.nh.us. That's remotesenate@leg.state.nh.us, or call 603-271-6931, 271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during the meeting shall be done by roll call vote. And finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states his presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I'll call the roll. Senator D'Alessandro.
I'm Senator Lou D'Alessandro. I'm in Manchester in my home, and my wife is in the house.
Senator Daniels.
Senator Gary Daniels, I'm at my home in Milford and I'm alone.
Senator Hennessy.
Good morning, Erin Hennessy from Littleton. I am home alone.
Senator Rosenwald.
Good morning, Cindy Rosenwald from Nashua. I'm in my home and I'm alone.
And I'm Senator Bob Guida in my home. My daughter and grandson and dog are upstairs and may transit, but I'm alone currently. So I think our order of business today, let me get to my agenda page here. For 9 o'clock, we're scheduled for House Bill 134, repealing certain inactive dedicated funds. Representative Major contacted me last evening as the chair of that committee and indicated that Representative Almy would be presenting testimony. Representative Almy, are you there?
I am.
Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Chairman Guida. And thank you everyone on the committee for this opportunity. I'm speaking for the House Ways and Means Committee on HB 134, repealing certain inactive dedicated funds. Those of you on the Senate Ways and Means last term have seen most of this bill before. It was brought late to the Senate because of a glitch in the House and then could not get back to the House as COVID took hold. It is now the result of both the 2019 and the 2020 meetings of the Joint Committee on Dedicated Funds, which your chairman was on. I hope he still is on. In 2020, we found very little that needed to be added on to change the law, partly because some of the agencies were unable to answer the questions that we had until things returned to normal. The bill repeals 4 funds in Section 1 whose usefulness is past or which never got off the ground. And in Section 2, it adds 2 forestry funds that needed to have their own separate identities. Section 3 corrects the language of the Alcohol Abuse and Prevention Treatment Fund so that it will not be orphaned when the current redirection of Medicaid money through it is reversed. Sections 4 to 6 repeal a program that resulted in continuing small funds being sent by telephone companies to a fund with no purpose. And it lapses the $11,600 to the PUC, which oversaw the program. Sections 7 to 8 repeal an attempt to create more meat inspectors in New Hampshire, which the Department of Agriculture cannot make work. It never had any money in it. Section 9, with the permission of the only current commission member, repeals the fund set up to create that lovely statue of Joan Widmer in front of the State Library. It leaves enough language in the statute to provide for raising small amounts of money for any future repairs, but otherwise mothballs the fund. The fund itself is gone. Sections 10 to 11 moves the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification from year 4 of our rotating calendar, which was 2020, to year 5 to give them time to have performance and financial audits done and rethink their structure, which is being done right now. And we are assured that by this summer, we will be able to meet with them. All of this was done together with the agencies in question and with their approval. House Ways and Means passed the bill unanimously, and we ask your approval also. And if there are any questions, I'll try to remember how to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions for members of the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is about the public payphone account. I remember in my first term on House Finance, which was 2011-12, there were 2 public payphones in the state that were getting subsidies through the budget. I think one was in Swansea and the other one was somewhere else. But they were considered important for public safety because there was, I guess, no cell service in those towns. And the police depended on them to be available. Have those 2 public phones now been made obsolete? Do you know?
I do not know. We charged the PUC with finding out. Actually, we were only told about one phone, which was the phone in the town of the sponsor of the bill that created this fund. And the fund apparently never paid for that phone, or presumably the other phone. And you're explaining why, if the budget also paid for these things, then it just must have continued to do so until they disappeared.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions from members of the committee? Senator Daniels, did I see your hand up?
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Albee, kudos to Steve Shurtleff for this Widmer fund. But my question is, will the Widmer fund continue to accept donations for the care of the statue that's up and that out in front of the library? Is that going to be an ongoing situation?
The intent, and it's only ex-Speaker Shurtleff that was on the commission when I went to him to get the language that he would want to continue the oversight of it. And he thought that the best thing to do would be to remove the fund, which is going to be inactive for a long time until that statute needs something. And they have not been for quite a while seeking donations for it. They had, I believe, used all of the money up because we had no need to lapse the money to anything. And the idea was that with the statutory language that was set up, that is left in the legislation, they would be able to reconstruct the commission and find small amounts of money that would be needed to do the repairs without having to go through a dedicated fund process.
Okay, thank you. I served on that commission, and I know how hard the former speaker worked to raise that money. Not a penny of state money went into that statue and the creation of the site, etc. I would hate to see something happen where there wasn't maintenance of it. It's a wonderful tribute. So that's just my one concern. But if Steve wants it this way, I would accept that.
Well, I'm presuming that he consulted with the legal counsel of the time about how to set that up. And we could have just left the statute and the dedicated fund in place, but it sounded like it would be quite a while before they'd need to do anything again.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably a question for the LBA if they're around.
I have, before we answer, I've asked Chris Shea to bring to all members of the committee the balance of all the funds that are being expunged. So if that was your question, we may.
Well, yeah, my question, it was a follow-up question about the
Okay.
paid funds, because I
Sure.
see that there is still one and the commission recommended we keep the fund until we get rid of that one. And it was Ackworth, not Swansea.
Yes,
My apologies.
yes, I believe that's the one fund on one phone.
Send an email to all of you.
So
So my question really is for Mr. Shea, I guess.
Further questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Representative Almy.
thank you.
Representative Major, I think, has signed up to speak, but he won't be able. He had a conflicting engagement, I think, perhaps.
Mr. Chair, I do see him under attendees.
Oh, great. Great. Thank you.
Got it. Representative Major, you should be all set.
He may be just attending and not participating, because he did
Yep.
call me last evening. I suspect that's probably the case.
Okay, I'll just take him. There we go. At this time, Mr. Chair, that's all we had signed up to speak. So if anyone else who wants to speak to House Bill 134, it would be this time to virtually raise your hand or dial *9. And I do not see any hands, Mr. Chair.
All right, at this time, I'll close the hearing on House Bill 134. Is the committee comfortable executing it later this morning, or would you rather wait?
I think it's very simple, Bill, that we should exec it and get it out.
Okay.
I'd like to just get clarification though from LBA about how that one payphone is going to be supported. Will it be a budget appropriation?
Sonia?
I could ask Chris to join later when we go into exec session.
Sure,
Right.
that'd be great.
Great.
All right. All right, so we'll now move into the hearing on Senate Bill 100. Adopts legislation relative to establishing a commission to study workplace safety in healthcare settings, establishing a commission to study payments in lieu of taxes as requested by the Assessing Standards Board, establishing a commission to differentiate the cost of education and the cost of care for children in a residential facility, establishing a committee to study charitable gaming, establishing a committee to study the effects of COVID-19 lockdowns, quarantines, and school and business closures, and establishing a committee to study building a pier over the jetty at Hampton Beach State Park for disability access. So I think what we'll do is we'll address each of these sections individually. And if the sponsors are here, and then we'll circle back around and go through with the speakers by section. So.
Super. So, Mr. Chair, part 1 and part 2 are Senator Gray's bills, and I do not see Senator Gray among the attendees at this moment. There is a hand raised.
I
So,
think that's Josh.
oh. Josh, is that you?
It is. Surprise. Good morning.
Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm pinch hitting today for Senator Gray. He is tied up in election law and exec session this morning. So I'm going to introduce his part 1s and his part 1, and his part 2. Part 1 establishes a committee to study workplace safety in healthcare settings. And part 2 establishes a commission to study payments in lieu of taxes. Both were prime sponsored by Senator Gray.
All right. So let's start with part 1. Who do we have available to testify on that?
Senator, we have some prime sponsors of the other sections.
Okay.
here.
Okay, let's continue that through. Thank you, Sonia. Yeah.
So for part 3, that's Senator Ward's bill. I do not see her under the attendees at this time. Maybe it's Josh again.
Good morning again. I'm sorry. I should have just stayed on. I've been texting back and forth with Marie. I know Senator Ward is also caught in an exec session, so I wasn't sure if she was going to jump over or not. But at any rate, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I should have said this first. For the record, Josh Elliott, Deputy Chief of Staff for the State Senate, here on behalf of Senator Ward to introduce her Part 3 to Senate Bill 100. Part 3 would establish a commission to differentiate the cost of education and the cost of care for children in a residential facility. And with that, I will conclude my testimony.
Thank you.
So next, Mr. Chair, for part 4 is Senator D'Alessandro.
I'm here.
Senator D'Alessandro, you're recognized to speak to your part of Senate Bill 100.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, for the record, I'm Senator Lou D'Alessandro. I represent District 20, Manchester Wards 3, 4, 10, 11 in the town of Goffstown. And I come before you as the prime sponsor of a piece of legislation to establish a committee to study charitable gaming. We've had charitable gaming in this state for a number of years, but what we have noticed over the past few years is a significant expansion in charitable gaming. The last time we looked at this, Senator Odell chaired a committee that looked at how the proceeds from charitable gaming were distributed. And at that time, the 35% going to the charities became the method by which the charities received their share. Since that time, a lot has changed in charitable gaming. Keno has come into play. Table games have come into play, and very expansive, the advent of card rooms. And the charitable gaming facilities now call themselves casinos. So it seems to me that it's about time to look at how charitable gaming is conducted. Do the charities receive the 35% that they were really guaranteed by law? What is the state's responsibility in terms of oversight? What does the state receive in terms of remuneration? And how are these games conducted? And presently, we're looking at another addition to charitable gaming. We're going to exec on a bill, I'm sure, either today or next week, that adds another amenity to the charitable gaming mix, and that's the historic racing situation. Testimony indicates that is going to produce a significant amount of money, and the distribution of those funds is important, as all of us have been receiving, I believe, inquiries from charities, if not inquiries, I think statements from charities about how important this new amenity is to their share of the proceeds of these games that will be conducted, and how important it is to their well-being. So I think it's about time that we take a look at this phenomenon, which has had significant expansion, as I said, over the last few years, and to make sure that A, they're run properly, B, that the charities get what they were promised, how the charities are set up, how do they choose charities, how do you create the list of the charities, who gets on, who doesn't get on, and all of these. I think it bears a strong look-see at this point in time. If this is going to continue, which it appears to be, it's going to continue. We're not going to choose an alternate methodology for this. So it seems to me it's about time that we took a close look at it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll entertain any questions you might have. Thanks so much for listening to my testimony, and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the sponsor? Hearing none. We have the next section.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so part 5 and part 6 are prime sponsored by Senator Avard.
Good morning, Senator. Welcome.
Senator, you are muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got part 6 and part 7. I'm on my list here. One for the study of COVID, and the other for the study of building a pier. I'm not sure where 5 is.
There is no 7.
There you go. Well,
You had me
seven.
scratching my bald
Right.
head.
you know what? I am reading this wrong, so it's my fault.
7 disappeared.
You're off to a good start. I'm looking at something else. Wrong page. There we go. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. For the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard, District 12. And what we're looking at right now is on part 5 is to establish a committee to study the effects of the COVID lockdown. One of my constituents approached me and they wanted to know exactly what was the effects of it, where was the cost, and how it's affecting the people suffering from PTSD. And there's a part where people are because of the quarantine. Just trying to find my little location here. PTSD and overdose suicides and because of the permanent closures of businesses and whatnot. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's just to find out what happened. How did it affect our population? So I don't know if you have any questions on that, but I'm doing this for one of my constituents. So, and I'd be happy to chair it if you folks decide to move it forward with this portion of the omnibus.
How many, have any questions from members of the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Avard. As I read this section, this is a big lift for a short time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if November 1st of this year is a long enough period of time, or whether that date, whether you'd be flexible on that date in order to do a more thorough job for these 5 intrepid legislators.
I'd be very willing to move the date out further, or if you want to shorten the list. I'm very interested in PTSD and overdoses and suicides specifically.
Mhm.
I know also the closing of businesses is very important, but I know other areas that people are working on, the schools and whatnot. And so if you want to shorten the list, I'm fine with that as well. But I just want to make sure that we know where we're at with these particular areas. So I'll leave it up to you folks in your wisdom.
Could I quickly just follow up?
Please.
Thank you. So we've been trying to get another committee's information out of the Department of Health and Human Services on a variety of measures, and it's been taking longer because of the other work they're doing and the amount of open staff. So I guess what I'm asking again is if we were to lengthen the period of time for the study, you'd be okay with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Avon, this committee would require significant data collection.
Mhm.
As Senator Rosenwald pointed out, the collection of that data will be a time-consuming process. So, the extension of the date, I think, is an imperative in order to get what you want, and secondly, it would seem to me that in selecting members, would it be more important to have people who have dealt with Health and Human Services designated as members of this committee because of their experience with legislation and with what's been happening in that environment for a period of time? Just a thought. I just wonder if you might accept that thought process in light of the fact that they may be up to speed easier than just selecting a person.
Oh, absolutely. And I have no problem with that also, but somebody that could also represent the small businesses as well. I mean, if we can include that as well, because
Are we in fact then not changing this from a committee to a commission?
I don't know. I think we have enough commissions, but if you want it, I'm easy. I want to get to I want this to be a service to the public, to the legislature as well. And so if this is, if extending the date out that's fine. Someone from HHS is great. I have no problem with that.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Avard, or Senator D'Alessandro, just to clarify what you were asking, were you asking for the Senate and House members to have HHS experience, or were you asking for a commission, somebody from the department to be put on it?
No, if it's going to be a legislative, I thought someone from the House or the Senate who's had HHS experience would be a worthy component as far as this is concerned. But their interaction with HHS is an imperative if you're going to get the data to make this a successful commission.
And if I may, I served on as vice chair and have been on HHS my 3 terms. So if you choose to select me as one of the people to gather the information, I'd be happy to participate in that.
So my further questions, Senator Daniels, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Avard, I can see where this request for the committee would be helpful in setting policy during the time that we were in lockdown, quarantine, things like that. If the state of emergency is lifted before, let's say by midsummer, what are we going to do with all this stuff, since it's, you're just getting information on things that have already been passed? So what's the purpose?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I think that there's nothing that says that this can't happen again.
Follow up?
Yes, please.
I think we could probably say that with everything from flus to any other thing, but I mean, are we going to expand it to look at other things as well?
Other things as well.
Right. Any other things that could come back as far as diseases or something like that?
We're just looking at the effect as what the shutdown specifically, the shutdown, how it's affecting our the citizens of New Hampshire. I don't know, it's not any more complicated than that. I just think that we can see, it'd be good to know what's happened, how the shutdown has affected the state. And if the state should be shut down again, maybe we can come up with some remedies as to how to function a little more streamlined, I guess. I'm not really sure, but that'll all be gone all through the study, I would assume.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from members of the committee? my thoughts are, if I may, that I'm not certain that we need to have people from the various agencies on the committee. And I'm not sure whether they would be wanting to actually spend the time, especially HHS folks that would be, knowledgeable of the statistical information that might be sought. So I don't like to establish commissions. I'd rather work with the legislative committees and have people with their data present to the committee so the committee can then deliberate. But that's my own personal preference. With that, are there any testifiers for this, Ava?
So, Mr. Chair, Senator Avard actually still has to introduce his last part.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
You had two parts, Senator. I think you had introduced one part, and then there's still a second part before we go to testifiers.
That is correct. There's part 6, yes.
Right. Yes.
Okay. But with regard, that's not this study. This is a separate study.
No, that's different. Go ahead. That was my slip up. I apologize.
It could have been mine. I'm really good at slipping up. Anyway, the second part 6 is to establish a committee to study building a pier over the jetty at Hampton Beach State Park for access for people with disabilities. Just for the record, I did visit Hampton Beach yesterday with my wife. We got caught in a snow squall. I thought it was a great day to walk on the beach and just have the wind blowing in our face. And as we're walking the dog, I probably embarrassed my wife a few times because I approached some strangers on the beach walking their dogs. Of course, a dog is a nice way to approach another person with another dog. And so I'd asked some folks, what are your thoughts about a pier over the beach, over the jetty? And I talked to one senior lady, and she said, she's visiting from New York, and she drove 5 or 5.5 hours from New York, maybe 6 hours, to come visit the beach because she's been here since since she was 7 years old, and with her sister. And her sister can't really walk the beach, so she's parked up at the edge because she had a stroke. But they love visiting the beach. And she said in all her lifetime, she's never walked the jetty because of fear of falling into cracks. In years past, I have watched search and rescues come to the jetty, and they've rescued people, and it looked like a pretty difficult thing to do because they had to take a boat and they had to have lifeguards, and it was really difficult to negotiate that. Having talked with Senator Stiles in the past about the jetty, she always was in favor of even having it closed for public safety. But there again, people still want to walk on it. They look at it. They like to fish off of it. But there is a public hazard. And in my thoughts with regards to this, I'm thinking about the flume. Many people love to go to the state park and they love to walk the flume. And fortunately, there are places where people can walk. There's ladders, there's guardrails, so that people can walk up and see the beauty of the creation and the beauty of our natural resources. But somebody had to have the idea. And I think it's time that we at least consider the idea, especially for individuals that are of the DD community, people with disabilities, seniors that would love to go out there and view the beauty. It would be a great idea for a tourist attraction. I'm sure the businesses would really appreciate it. The bait shops, if you allow people to fish off of it. And other states have piers. Why can't we? And so it's not saying we're going to build one, but let's use the idea of at least considering that. And so I'd love the idea, to be frank with you. But obviously things cost money, and it has to work for everybody. So that's why I'm bringing in this study committee, and I would love to chair it, seeing how I'm the chair of natural resources and fish and game and all that stuff. Question?
All right. Any questions from the committee? All right, hearing none. I believe that's the last of the sections, and we can now begin to take testimony on, let's go to part 1 and begin there.
Thank you.
So to the folks under attendees, if you are here to speak and testify as part one of this bill, this would be the appropriate time to virtually raise your hand or dial *9. Okay, Mr. Chair, we have Paula Minahan.
All right, and this is speaking on part one, establishing commission to study workplace safety in healthcare settings, sponsored by
Yes.
Senator Gray. Paula, welcome today.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. For the record, my name is Paula Minahan, Senior Vice President, State Government Relations with the New Hampshire Hospital Association, representing all our hospitals. Today, I am testifying. I actually would like to testify on part two as well, if you would allow, or if you prefer, I will come back. But part one and part two are of interest to the Hospital Association. So I will speak on part one, and then you let me know, Chair, if you want me to talk about part two now or later.
I think
Part
for the
one-
purpose of recording minutes, we'll just do them separately, all right? We'll ask you to come
Perfect.
back
Yep.
to part two, Paula.
Yep,
Thanks.
perfect. So part one of the bill, we are very appreciative of Senator Gray's willingness to sponsor part one of the bill. The Hospital Association, along with other healthcare providers, did ask him to sponsor this last year. It did pass the Senate with strong support. However, due to the pandemic, it never crossed over and was heard in the House. So he agreed to reintroduce it this year, and it's exactly the same as what passed out of the Senate in 2020. I have submitted my testimony to Sonia yesterday, so I will not read all of it, but I will just highlight what's important, and that essentially, along with other healthcare provider organizations, have asked that this commission be established to address the ongoing concern that you are all well aware of, unfortunately, that our healthcare workers face every day, caring for patients. The incidence of violence against healthcare workers in New Hampshire hospitals and other healthcare settings continues, and in fact, unfortunately, has gotten worse during the pandemic, and understandably so. Patients are very stressed when they reach the hospital and the emergency room especially, but nonetheless, it is extremely important that we establish this commission and address various policies and strategies to address the ongoing concerns. And we do believe a comprehensive multidisciplinary approach is warranted. I know it is a very large commission. We actually added a couple to the commission after it was heard in Senate HHS last year, but it is every single one of those individuals listed on the commission membership is important for the multidisciplinary approach that is really needed. We have been looking at this issue for years, but we need all of those stakeholders at the table to really come up with the right approach. So I will leave my testimony at that. We do really appreciate your consideration, and we are hopeful that you will pass part one of the bill. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I will stay on for part two.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the committee? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paula, as you know, we have passed legislation to up the authority that safety officers at the hospitals have. Has that proved to be effective, and does it need to be enhanced?
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro, and thank you for working on that important bill a few years ago. And I think it has helped. I think the issue really is relative to the authority of the law enforcement, not necessarily the security officers, but law enforcement. There are limitations if they have not actually seen the altercation, if you will, what exactly they can do without actually seeing it themselves without a warrant. I obviously am not a lawyer, but that is my understanding from talking with the Attorney General's office. There are just limitations to what exactly a healthcare worker can do relative to filing any charges. So that's one issue, but it's, as you know, multifaceted. And, but yes, having the security officers have more authority, I think has helped. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, I do have one. Paula, if I recall correctly, has not the healthcare and hospital workplace now risen to the #1 place of workplace injuries in the country?
I am not questioning that statistic, Senator. It doesn't surprise me. I'm just not personally aware of that. But it has, like I said, this past year has been extremely challenging for everyone, including healthcare workers. And again, the violence, unfortunately, in those settings has actually risen. So again, this commission's more important than ever at this point. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next speaker.
Okay, Mr. Chair, next we have Joan Widmer.
Good morning, Senators, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on in support of this part of Senate Bill 100. I actually was with Paula Minahan 2 years ago when we first approached Senator Gray about addressing this issue. At that time, I was serving as the executive director of the New Hampshire Nurses Association. Today, however, I'm speaking as an individual and as co-chair of the Emergency Nurses Room Association State Council for the New Hampshire chapter. Workplace violence is a big issue, as Paula indicated. According to the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, 73% of the victims of workplace violence in all settings come from healthcare or social assistance work environments. 20% of these victims require 1 month or more away on disability pay as a result of the violence that they are subjected to. A 2009 study of almost 3,500 registered nurses conducted by the Emergency Nurses Association found that approximately 25% of the respondents to the survey had experienced physical violence more than 20 times in the past 3 years. Over 20%, about 20% of these respondents had experienced verbal violence, assaults over 200 times in the past 3 years. Physical violence comes in the form of being yelled at, cursed at, intimidated, harassed. I'm sorry, that was verbal abuse, or harassed with sexual language or innuendo. Physical violence includes being pushed, shoved, hit, scratched, kicked, and spit upon. In 2019, just prior to the onset of the pandemic, the American Nurses Association conducted a similar study, and they found 1 in 4 nurses had been experienced physical or verbal assault in the workplace. 20 to 60% of these assaults go unreported. A group working with the University of New Hampshire and the New Hampshire Nurses Association conducted a survey that was limited to Merrimack County here in New Hampshire in 2019. Their survey found 24% of nurses reported experiencing physical acts of aggression and 35% reported acts of verbal aggression. The majority of these acts of aggression were perpetrated by patients, but sometimes by family members and visitors of the patients. So clearly, there's documented evidence, and the literature supports the fact that this is an issue. And I agree completely with Paula Minahan's testimony that we need a comprehensive solution to address these issues. I will submit in writing my written testimony along with references at the conclusion of this hearing. And I'm open for any questions if you have them.
Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much, Ms. Widmer.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. Chair, we have Alex, and I apologize if I butcher this last name, Alex Katrubis.
You said it perfectly.
Super.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alex Katrubis.
Your internet connection is unstable.
Can you not hear me?
You're all set.
Oh, I
Sorry
can
about
hear
that.
you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alex Katrubis. I am from Dennehy and Boulay. We represent several clients who are in support of Section 1 of this bill, establishing a commission to study workplace safety and healthcare. One specific client in support of Section 1 is New Hampshire Arch. They are a named member of the study commission. New Hampshire Arch is the Association of Residential Care Homes, and they thank the sponsors of the bill for their inclusion as a member of the study. New Hampshire Arch will make the commitment to appoint someone from their association who can provide valuable input to help achieve the commission's stated objections. As you've heard, this legislation will bring together the relevant stakeholders to look at solutions for workplace safety. Again, as you've heard, healthcare workplace violence is a growing concern in New Hampshire. One recent example is listed on the February 17th Governor and Council agenda. The agenda packet for that meeting includes a letter from Commissioner Shibinet that outlines a state employee who works at the Laconia Designated Receiving Facility who was injured on the job in mid-January of this year. The Laconia DRF is located on the former grounds of the Laconia State School and Training Center. The commissioner's letter says that the state employee's injuries were the result of a, quote, patient assault. As a result of this assault, the employee was out of work on medical leave. The study commission in this bill can look at new laws and how we can improve existing laws to protect healthcare workers like this individual in Laconia. So with that, we ask you to support this provision of Senate Bill 100. Thank you very much for listening and considering my testimony this morning.
Oh, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I don't see any hands raised. Oh, we do have one. Jeff Scianti.
Yes, good morning and thank you, Mr. Chairman and the members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Jeff Shanti and I'm speaking as the CEO of Frisbee Memorial Hospital and testifying in support of Senate Bill 100 and the establishing a commission to study workplace safety in healthcare settings. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, 12% of all of the injuries sustained by registered nurses are from violent acts. And according to the group No Silence on ED Violence, 7 in 10 U.S. emergency room nurses reporting having been hit or kicked on the job. Violence in the emergency department only harms the healthcare professionals who are committed to helping others, but it also interferes with the ability to deliver high-quality patient care. And this isn't just happening to nurses, but it's also happening to many other patient-facing healthcare professionals. According to a survey conducted by the American College of Emergency Physicians, nearly half of the ER physicians polled reported being physically assaulted, and nearly 7 in 10 emergency physicians say that ED violence has increased within the past 5 years. Healthcare workers face more than 4 times the rate of violence incidents than in any other private industry. About 80% of all serious violent incidents are patient-related. And while hospital security presence can de-escalate some situations, security can't respond quickly enough to prevent violence. And speaking as a healthcare leader, our hospital recently was directly affected by this ongoing problem. Most recently, Frisbee had one of our own employees, Rick Simo, a security guard doing his job protecting our staff and patients and visitors, violently attacked. He suffered a traumatic head injury and was subsequently died from the injuries sustained. Rick worked at Frisbee as a security officer since April of 2019. His presence on the night shift and his strong military training provided a deep sense of security to staff and to those that all he worked with. And while Rick began his career in the military, he was in the Army for over 30 years. He was a dedicated employee, father, husband, and beloved by many of the staff members by which he crossed paths with. It's still difficult for me to comprehend this incredible loss and senseless violent act. This violence has escalated in recent years, in part because of patients coming to the ED with behavioral or drug-induced psychoses. And it's not just a problem within our emergency departments, but also our inpatient units as well. Despite these troubling trends, the policy response at both the federal and state levels has not been up to where it needs to be. And something needs to be done to protect our healthcare workers so that they don't have to come to work in fear of being hurt, abused, or harassed by the very community in which they are caring for. I support Senate Bill 100 and the establishing of the Commission to study workplace safety in healthcare settings. And I thank you for this time and being able to testify.
Thank you for coming forward. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Schianti. Oh.
Okay, so at this time, if you are interested in speaking to this part of the bill, this would be the appropriate time to virtually raise your hand or dial *9 via phone. I do not see any hands. Oh, we have another hand. Kathleen Reardon.
I'm sorry, are we on part 2? I may have jumped ahead. I apologize.
We're still on part 1 for the moment.
I apologize.
Okay.
All right, any further questions from the members of the committee, or further speakers, I should say?
There are no hands raised at this time for part 1.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to part 2.
So I'll bring Kathleen back.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. You can hear me now. I apologize for that. So my name is Kathleen Reardon. I am the CEO of the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits, which is a statewide association that supports nonprofit organizations, helping strengthening their organizations and giving voice to the nonprofit sector through leadership, collaboration, and learning opportunities. And I just want to thank the committee for allowing us the opportunity today to request that the committee amend Part 2 of SB 100 to add the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits to the proposed study commission on payment in lieu of taxes, which are also known as pilots, as noted. I did submit written testimony to Sonia earlier this morning, but just, to highlight, as many of you know, New Hampshire RSA 7223 provides for an exemption to religious, educational, and charitable organizations from taxation of real estate and personal property if the real estate and personal property are used for mission-related purposes. This exemption is really crucial to many nonprofits, large and small, and their fiscal model is built on this assumption. Over the past year, we've seen the incredible heroic efforts of nonprofits as clear parts of our community ecosystem, whether they're healthcare workers, providing childcare, making it possible for parents to go back to work, educational institutions, and other community organizations. In some cases, pilot agreements are developed in good faith voluntarily to offset some of those municipal related expenses. But it is important to note that whether voluntary or not, pilots divert money from a charitable organization's missions, and many donors to nonprofits direct their funding to those missions. So any pilot increases the pressure on nonprofits and their funding systems. In addition, I think we must really be concerned about opening the floodgates and creating policies that encourage municipalities to collect revenue from nonprofits that are clearly exempt by law. Many nonprofits would not survive such a burden. We understand that the Assessing Standards Board has an interest in convening a study on pilots. As the state's primary voice for the nonprofit sector, we hope that you'll favorably consider our request to be part of the conversation. We would prefer to be a part of the process, listen to concerns, and help with a fact-finding process rather than be putting in a position of having to react to a commission report after it has been filed. Thank you again for your opportunity to request this amendment to include a representative from the New Hampshire Center of Nonprofits. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any questions from members of the committee? Let me start by just advising you that I have asked for an amendment to be drafted. That was Friday, I believe. And so I'm quite certain that OLS has not yet had time to deliver that, but adding the Center for Nonprofits into the commission. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Kathleen.
Next, Mr. Chair, we have Courtney Tanner.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. Can you hear me okay? Great.
Yes.
For the record, I'm the Director of Government Relations at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to testify on Senate Bill 100. I'll be really brief this morning. It's my understanding that you've already heard testimony for part 1 of this bill, but I want to raise our support for part 1 of Senate Bill 100 relative to establishing a commission to study workplace safety for healthcare settings. This is an important piece of legislation that didn't march forward last year due to COVID-19, and we appreciate your willingness to look at passing this commission for this legislative session. It's a really important piece that our emergency departments and other areas of our healthcare settings are grappling with every day. And so we appreciate your willingness to think about studying workplace safety for healthcare settings. I'm happy to take questions, but I'm also equally happy to offer up any expertise as from our clinical team too. Karen Clements, our Chief Nursing Officer, testified in support of this bill last session, and we echo last session's support.
Any questions from members of the committee? I do have a question, and it may be one that's not able to be answered. Do you have any breakdown of what percentage of your injuries occur in the emergency versus what I would consider non-emergency care?
Senator Gaida, I'm happy to circle back with you. I don't have that off the top of my head, of course, but I'm happy to circle back with you. I'm grateful for the question.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Courtney.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. Chair, we have Paula Minahan.
Paula, welcome back.
Thank you. Again, for the record, Paula Minahan, Hospital Association. I am now testifying on part 2 of the bill of Senate Bill 100. Unfortunately, we cannot be supportive of part 2 of the commission to study payment in lieu of taxes. This bill was also introduced last year and actually was heard in election law and municipal affairs, but did not pass out of committee. We do have significant concerns about part 2, which would establish what we call a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, made by charitable organizations. 23 of New Hampshire's 26 community hospitals are nonprofit and exempted from property taxes under RSA 72. And some of our hospitals, however, have negotiated and do make arrangements to make payments in lieu of taxes with their communities. Those decisions are made at a local level, and we believe that is where these decisions should remain. Again, I have submitted my testimony, so I will not read from that, but I just think it's important. I will highlight a couple statistics. One is last year in 2018, the last year for which this information is available, New Hampshire's nonprofit community hospitals provided nearly $500 million in community benefits. And as Ms. Reardon indicated, that could be in jeopardy potentially if pilots were a mandate. And we do, the hospitals do work collaboratively to assess and identify the needs of their communities through these detailed community health needs assessments, which result in the community benefits. And they do report all of this to the community, the Office of Charitable Trusts in the Attorney General's office. Decisions about whether a community and a nonprofit hospital or other entity should enter into a pilot is a local decision. and one that would be determined based on local community needs, decision makers, and more. We are concerned that this study commission would create the expectation that nonprofits exempted from property taxes be required to enter into a pilot. We do not believe this type of mandate from the legislature is the right approach, and we do believe the best approach is to leave those decisions to the local decision makers and as to how best to serve their communities. Again, we are supportive of part one, but we request that you, or we don't support part two of Senate Bill 100. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from members of the committee? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Paula.
Okay, so at this time, if you are wishing to speak to part two of Senate Bill 100, you would raise your hand virtually or dial *9 if you're calling via phone. And I do not see any hands raised at this time, Mr. Chair, for part two.
All right. Very well, then. We'll move on to part three.
Okay,
Part
if you are
two.
here to speak or testify to part three,
All right.
please virtually raise your hand or dial *9.
It's establishing a commission to differentiate the cost of education and the cost of care for children in a residential facility, sponsored by Senator Ward.
I do not see any hands raised at this time, Mr. Chair, for part three.
All right.
So move on to
Hearing
part
none,
four.
Move on to part four. Yeah.
Super. So if you are here to speak to part four of Senate Bill 100, this would be the appropriate time to virtually raise your hand or dial *9 if you're calling via phone. So first, Mr. Chair, we have Senator Bragdon.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
My name is
Senator
Peter Bragdon. For the record, I represent Churchill Downs Incorporated, here to speak in favor of Part 4 of SB 100 to establish a committee to study the regulatory structure of charitable gaming. As I noted in my testimony last week, Churchill Downs is not only home to the Kentucky Derby, Churchill Downs also operates 10 gaming facilities in 9 states. These are clean, modern facilities featuring electronic and table gaming, the same types of games, table games we see in New Hampshire's casinos. Churchill Downs is both a gaming operator and a publicly traded corporation. As such, knows a strong regulatory environment is important to the entire gaming community. If something goes awry at one facility, it affects public confidence statewide and perhaps nationwide. This is even more important with charitable gaming because people want to be sure the money is going to the charities and not sneaking out the back door. I note that on page 5, line 34 of the bill, this study committee is asked to review the reports of prior study committees with respect to this matter. And looking through the legislature's archives, I found a couple of these reports. For instance, we had the final report of the Gaming Regulatory Oversight Committee in 2013. In particular, pages 36 to 39 of that report refer to, quote, significant deficiencies in the existing charitable gaming regulatory system, noting that the state only had 3 field investigators. These are the people who watch the games and the back office operations to make sure the games are run in compliance with state regulations and thus make sure the charities receive all that is due them. That would be 3 field investigators to watch the operation of close to 300 full-time gambling tables in 16 locations across the state, from Berlin to the Seacoast to the Connecticut River. The 2013 report calls that lack of field personnel a significant deficiency. And then we had the final report of the Games for Charity Study Committee of 2015. I believe Senator D'Alessandro was on this committee. It contains repeated warnings about the lack of staff to oversee charitable gaming activity in New Hampshire. It notes that 2 years after the prior report, there were still only 3 field investigators to watch the operation of 300 full-time gambling tables spread across the entire state. Their recommendation was to bring on 3 more full-time field investigators and 20 or more part-timers These facilities are scattered across the state. They're open until 1 a.m. They're open on Saturdays. They're open on holidays. And I think they felt that locally based part-timers would probably be more efficient than full-timers who are going to spend most of their time in the car driving from place to place across the state. And by the way, when I checked a couple of months ago, 5 years after this report and 7 years after the first report, we still have only 3 full-time investigators, plus a supervisor and 1 part-timer. So that was back in 2015 when the total amount wagered at Games of Chance was probably around $200 million. Now we're at around $300 million. If you add in historic racing machines, that would be 1,000 machines and another $550 million for a total of $850 million. We're looking at close to $1 billion of cash coming into charitable gaming facilities, and we still only have 3 people laying eyes on the tables, the games, and the facilities. Here are 3 quotes from that report. Charitable gaming is a system that can, if left unattended, serve the charities less and private interests more. Charities are at the mercy of those individuals into whose hands the charity has entrusted their gaming receipts, often with poor results for the charity. And finally, before any discussion of expanding charitable gaming, there must be a commitment by the state to adequately fund the positions necessary for oversight and enforcement to ensure the integrity of the games. And by the way, I'll note this is not a lottery commission issue per se. These positions are requested in the budget, but are never filled. That 2015 report referenced the Cocheco Valley Humane Society, who received about $70,000 from gaming activities in 2013. However, a subsequent audit discovered that $20,000 of proceeds were unaccounted for. There was $90,000 of unapproved and unreported free plays awarded, and there was $20,000 of questionable expenses. That's $130,000 of potentially missing proceeds for charity, almost twice as much money as the charity actually received. I suggest these prior reports would provide good background reading for the committee members as you consider this bill and other bills related to charitable gaming. In closing, I repeat, Churchill Downs supports a strong regulatory environment. A strong regulatory environment increases public trust and, more importantly, ensures that money that is supposed to be going to the charities is indeed going to the charities and not slipping out the back door. For that reason, Churchill Downs enthusiastically supports Part 4 of Senate Bill 100 and urges an ought to pass recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions for Peter today? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Chair, we have Rick Newman.
Rick, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be very brief. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Rick Newman. I'm representing the New Hampshire Charitable Gaming Operators Association. We also are fine with this study committee. We think taking a look at the charitable gaming is a good idea. I just want to say, I have to say for the record that the comments of Churchill Downs and their attacks on charitable gaming are bewildering to me, but I want to point out to the committee that the studies that were done, that were just talked about, were done relative to the previous regulatory agency that regulated charitable gaming, number one. Secondly, the statement that there's only 3 people overseeing charitable gaming is just simply false. Director McIntyre told the Finance Committee recently there are 11 people in enforcement working in charitable gaming in New Hampshire at the Lottery Commission. I would point out that Churchill Downs, which is based in Kentucky, a state that handles $2.6 billion in gambling, does in fact only have 3 regulators. So perhaps there's confusion there. But I do want to say that, you know, this constant attack by out-of-state casinos against charitable gaming, insinuating money's going out the back door, has been proven false by many, many audits of every operator that have been done by the Lottery Commission over the past several years. And with that, I'll end my testimony and say that we have no problem with a study commission. We think it's a good idea to always be looking at things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions for Mr. Newman from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much, Rick.
Okay, so if you are here and wishing to speak to Senate Bill 100 Part 4, this would be the appropriate time to virtually raise your hand or dial *9. And I do not see any hands raised at this time, Mr. Chair, for Part 4.
All right. Thank you, Ava. At this time, we'll commence the testimony on Part 5 of the bill.
Oh, perfect. So if you are here to speak to Part 5, this would be the time to virtually raise your hand or dial *9.
Just to review, Part 5 is establishing a committee to study the effects of COVID-19 lockdowns, quarantines, and school and business closings, sponsored by Senator Evard.
I do not see any hands raised at this time for Part 5.
All right.
All right.
And we'll go on to Part 6. Establishing committee to study building a pier over the jetty at Hampton Beach State Park for disability access. And that would be sponsored by Senator Evard as well.
So if you are here to speak to Part 6, this would be the appropriate time to virtually raise your hand or dial *9. And I do not see any hands, Mr. Chair.
All right, at this time, has anyone come back or come in since that wants to testify in any other parts, any of parts 1 through 6 of the bill?
I do not see any hands at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. At this time, then, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 100. All right. I think I have to get my, Sonia, do you have any guidance? I said, I can't find my notes. I got too many pages open and not enough space on my screen.
Sure. So we have several bills we can exec. We have Senate Bills 102 and 112 that we heard last week. With regard to the House bill that we just heard this morning, Chris Shea was here, but unfortunately he had to hop off for another meeting. But Senator Rosenwald, he said if we get your question to him, he'll try and answer.
Yes, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, absolutely. So we're not in exec,
Thank you.
but let's just have a discussion.
Yeah, no, my question is, of the one public telephone that is still in operation, I guess it's in Ackworth, how will that be funded if we repeal the public interest payphone fund and eliminate the $11,000? Will it be a budget appropriation, and what's the source of funds and the amount?
Mr. Chair, you're muted.
Trying to keep my other phone. Excuse me a second.
So I'm going to send Chris an email. What was the amount you said that would be eliminated?
It's about $11,000.
Thanks.
That's the balance in the fund. I don't think that it costs anywhere near that much to maintain these phones, but I'm just wondering how we will maintain the one public phone that's still in operation and the cost to do that.
Well, the question I have is the one phone necessary? Is there cell service in Ackworth? And are there homes in the area where the phone is? I mean, most of the rest of the state has rural areas that don't have phones. And so the question is, why do we even have it?
So my memory from my first term on finance was that there wasn't really cell service. And the committee heard testimony that even the police had to use that public payphone. There were two at the time. I guess one isn't necessary, but I just want to make sure that we're not jeopardizing public safety and we have a way to pay for the one that the PUC thinks is still necessary.
So I sent that question off to Chris just now via email. So I'm hoping that maybe he'll be able to respond even though he's in another meeting. And also, Mr. Chair, Representative Almy does have her hand raised. I don't know if you want me to bring her in or wait until we're in exec session officially.
Without objection, I see no sense in keeping her on the, waiting. So Representative Almy, you're recognized.
Thank you. I think that the PUC itself is the only one that could answer this question. This was we asked the PUC to follow up and determine if there was any need over a year ago for this phone, or if the phone in fact still existed. And I'm sorry we didn't follow up and ask them why they hadn't told us yet. But it is the PUC that's responsible for it and would know. They told us last year that there was no money coming from this 11,600. The phone companies were just required to put the money in, and no one was taking the money out. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So go ahead, please, Lou. Go ahead, Senator D.
But to address Senator Rosenwald's concerns, the fact is it still needed because of the inability to get cell service or to get phone service in that area? I think that's the key question. We can't leave them without any ability to contact. If indeed that's the case, if not, then you can move it forward. But the PUC's understaffed at this point in time. There are only 2 members over there, so they're pretty burdened. But that's where the answer should come from, I think. And indeed, it's important. You don't want to leave anything uncovered, particularly when it comes to public safety. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have nothing against it, but $11,000 for a phone that's generating 0 revenue, and I'm not sure how many calls are made. There are vast expanses of our state that aren't covered, and so we'll go ahead and hold on execing this until we get an answer, and then we can move on to Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for Representative Almy. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. I just want to clarify what she said. Did she say that the fund is not being used by the telephone company that owns this phone and they're using their own funds to operate it?
Senator Almy?
Yes, that is what we were told, and there doesn't seem to be any money coming out of that fund. It's only going in from the telephone companies because of the statute.
Thank you. So I don't see how this fund even affects the phone.
We couldn't even find out if the phone still exists. But the PUC hopefully can find out. I don't know. As you say, they're very understaffed. They haven't been allowed to expand back to their usual components.
Well, we'll just wait. This isn't I'd like to get this exec, but if Senator Rosenwald can answer to that, we'll just wait and we'll get to it.
I mean, I guess I'm willing to repeal the fund, but I think we should just find out if we still need this phone and somehow it's funded in the budget, what the mechanism is. Maybe it's just a flat out state appropriation. I can't remember from 10 years ago.
I don't remember from
yesterday.
A year and a half ago. All right.
But I don't want to hold up action on this bill if you think it's ready to get exec.
We could exec it, and then if we want to change it, can change it on the floor. I'm trying to move the process along. We'll have information, I'm sure, by then.
Get that information that quickly.
I'm perfectly happy to vote on it.
All right, then I'll take a motion to go into executive
I'll
session.
move executive session.
Second,
Second by D'Alessandro. Roll call. Senator Hennessy.
We need a motion, right?
it's
Yeah,
already
motion's
done.
made and seconded to go into exec. So,
Oh, yes.
okay, Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes,
Senator Gaida votes yes. All right, so on this bill, House Bill 134, Chair would look for a motion ought to pass.
move on to pass.
Second.
Okay, D'Alessandro and Rosenwald ought to pass with a second. Any discussion? I think we can still request an answer to the questions, Cindy, and we'll move on. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call the roll. Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Gaida says yes. And I think we'll hold off on consent on it. We can pull it off consent.
Yeah. Move
all right.
consent.
All right. I'll second the consent. Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
and Senator Gaida votes yes. Consent. And who will take this out? Don't all jump at once.
I'll take it out.
All right, Senator D'Alessandro will take it out. All right. Are we ready to exec Senate Bill 100? I mean, certainly ready to discuss it.
Yeah. Well, I think if I might, Mr. Chairman,
Please. Yep.
obviously I want us to support item 4, but you wanted to propose an amendment to one of those, to one section, and I think I have that amendment. That amendment was drafted. I received it, and it's amendment 0812S, and this adds the Center for Nonprofits. Is that's your amendment?
That's the one. Interesting. I did not get a copy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, unusual because OLS was been jammed up and whatever. So I'm happy to entertain that amendment. Is it drafted in my name?
Yes, it's drafted. So I think the first thing we ought to do is I move amendment 0812S, which takes adds M after L. It says one representative from the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits appointed by the organization. And this is to amend 72:23A, Roman 1, as inserted by section 1 of part 2 of the bill, by inserting that following language, that one person from the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits be appointed by the organization. So I move that amendment.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll call the roll. On the amendment, Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. It's unanimous. And now I'll move on to pass as amended. Or Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. And this may be what Senator Rosenwald is going to speak to too, but I believe in part 5, we need an amendment to move the date of the report.
Right.
And that could be a committee amendment, I believe.
Yeah, that's got to be moved.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
I would move a committee amendment to move that date to November 1st of 2022. And if there's a second, I'd like to speak to how I got there.
Second.
Yeah, I speak to my motion.
Please.
Thank you.
I'm not even sure we need to.
So I thought about whether whether it would make sense to move it like to February 1st. of 2022. But I think this is an important thing to look at, and it's 3 big areas. And moving it to February wouldn't really do anything for the legislative calendar. So if it went back, if it was pushed out until November 1st of the next year, that would give time to file legislation if it was necessary for the following year, the following session. And I think give the committee the time to really look not only at local data, but if there's any relevant national studies. So I think this is definitely worth looking at, but I think we should really do it well.
Okay. Further discussion? Moved and seconded that we move the date to, did you say November 1st of 2022?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. Senator Hennessy, you had, I think you'd had your hand up earlier, or was that just to second the motion on changing the date?
Oh, that was just to discuss the change of date. Thank you.
Okay. Any further amendments to any section of Senate
Yes,
Bill 100?
yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I wonder, I'm looking at section 6,
Yeah.
the jetty pier over the jetty. And I'm just wondering whether the committee might be 2 members of the Senate rather than 3. That's more consistent with what we generally send over to the House in terms of membership. I'm sure that the Senate president is
sometimes we
trying
do
not to
one.
overwork the members. It also would be an odd number of members in case there was a vote that there wouldn't be a tie. And I just wonder if 2 members would be enough to look at this. So I would propose that as a committee amendment.
Yes.
We can do that. I had caught that earlier, but I'd forgotten to write it down, to write it down. So
I
3
think that
members is
makes
too
sense.
much. And the sponsor is
So-
fine with that too, so.
I'd move to change this committee makeup to 2 members of the Senate appointed by the president.
I
All right, I'll
second.
second that.
Well,
All right, we'll take any discussion. All right, we'll take the roll. Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. Consent?
I'll move ought to pass as amended.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much. I'm
Second.
getting ahead of myself. So ought to pass as amended is on the, is there a second?
Yes. Second.
Seconded by Rosenwald. Okay, any discussion? All in favor signify, I'm sorry. Too much town
You
meeting,
wish.
too much town meeting. I'm still, all right. Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
and Senator Gaida votes yes.
Move
Right.
consent.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded, Rosenwald, Hennessy on consent. Any discussion?
Well, I'm doing
Yeah.
this, I'm doing this reluctantly for expediting purposes.
Acknowledged and appreciated, Senator D.
Okay, thank you.
We'll call the roll. Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
quickly. Senator Hennessy.
Senator D has his hand raised.
Oh, I can't see that.
I pulled it down. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Daniels.
Oh, Senator
Yeah,
Daniels. Yeah, sorry.
All right, so just all right, Senator D'Alessandro, yes.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
No.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
and Senator Gaida will vote yes. 4-1. And who
Madam
wants to
Chair,
take it out?
Mr.
That-
Chair,
Yes,
So, it's a-
to make a motion to reconsider and maybe hear from Senator Daniels what it is he wanted to talk about before we took the vote.
I'm happy to do that.
Second.
Let's, that's a motion and seconded. So Senator Hennessy
Yes.
to reconsider, Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. And Senator Daniels is recognized to speak.
Thank you. I only want to bring attention to part 2 where there was testimony that they do not support
Yes.
that, comments about that it should be a local decision. So I wondered if putting it on consent was really the right thing in case people wanted to address that part of the bill.
If I may, I think that's a very important point. I'm glad you brought that up. I have that noted in my notes here. That it is and I'm thinking of particularly the hospitals in the city of Manchester, which I think both do something and have a negotiation with the city. I think what you're saying makes good sense as far as just a local issue. If it was a state issue, it may run into some real problems. So that's a great point. Thank you, Senator Daniels, for bringing that up.
Further discussion? So this commission would just study payment in lieu of taxes made by charitable organizations and other entities fully or partially exempt from property taxation under RSA 72. So in the sense that the study, it's a study, I would say, across the state of payment in lieu of taxes. I'm ambivalent. I mean, I'm neutral on the issue, but I know that in my communities, especially the college communities, they have arrangements. Some of them, I'm sure it's PILT. They have it's a public safety payment that the Plymouth State makes to the town, and that, of course, is negotiated by the town. But there are many other charitable organizations that do not pay any taxes, and I know that there are questions raised. Albeit very uncomfortable questions about should we take a look at organizations that are not paying taxes. And it is, you're right, Senator Daniels, this really is an issue that needs to be discussed. Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember, I think we've already voted this bill ought to pass with amendment, and now we're discussing whether it should be on the regular calendar and consent. And for me personally, if there's a member who objects to it being on consent, I would not vote to put it on consent now, knowing that.
Right, and my comments were, thank you, my comments were addressed to that very point, that this is something that's much more involved than something that should just go through on consent. So we've all voted to reconsider. So now we'll vote to take it off consent.
Actually, with
Or do we need to?
No, you don't need to, because Senator Daniels voted against.
It couldn't have
That's
been on
right.
consent
Right,
anyway.
that's right. Thank you.
We just need to designate someone to take it out, and I think we're all set.
All right, thanks, Sonia.
Yep.
And thank you, Senator Daniels. Excellent catch. Appreciate that. All right. Any other bills to exec?
Who would you like to take this bill out?
Who would like, well, look, I'll take it out. I don't have a problem taking it out. Yeah.
Great. So as for other bills, we have Senate Bill 102 and Senate Bill 112 that we could take up.
I would prefer if we could hold off on 112 until the next meeting, Mr. Chairman.
We will look at Senate Bill 102. Is there a motion?
Do we have any amendments for this one, Mr. Chair?
I'm looking.
I don't have any in my
I
possession.
don't have any at this point.
I'll move it on to pass.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to my notes on it here.
This is one that really the DRA was opposed to. Correct?
Neutral. Wait.
Well, they in that part one wasn't going to really help the community.
Right.
That's what I remember.
I think it might also be
I'd like to withdraw my
unconstitutional.
motion.
Yeah.
I think the discussion was part one was they were opposed, and I think part one would really cause some serious issues in almost every town.
Yeah, that's what I have in my notes.
Yeah.
Right.
Part two, I believe I didn't notice any objections to that.
Right.
And
And it
part two
passed
was local
last year.
option.
And part three
Was local option.
Right.
Senate
And
Bill 530.
I know that I've had several constituents call me and say their property taxes on the energy component itself are higher than the value they're getting from the reduction in electricity rates, which is interesting. So I think that the local option to provide a tax exemption would and that was on solar, would be acceptable. So we have an ought to pass, except
Could I amend
we need to
my
pull out section
motion?
1, right?
Yeah. If I could amend my motion, it
Yeah.
would be to amend the bill to remove section 1
Right.
and
Second.
keep the other sections.
Okay, moved and seconded to remove section 1 of Senate Bill 102. Any discussion? Right, hearing none, we'll call the roll. Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
and Senator Gaida votes yes.
I'm happy to take it out if you'd like.
All right, we're going to do ought to pass as
Or-
amended.
Yeah, sorry.
So who's
move
just going to
that.
move that? Okay.
I will.
Second.
Rosenwald moves ought to pass as amendments. Hennessy seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes.
Move consent.
Second. All right, any discussion? Senator D.
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Hennessy,
Elected official.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
and I vote yes, consent. Who's going to take that out? Did we decide that?
I'll take it out.
Okay, Senator Rosenwald will take it out. All right, and 112, I think we're holding off on.
Yeah, I wondered if we could get an answer to what is there a limitation on the number of machines? I don't see anything in this bill that says the limitation on the number.
I talked to Charlie McIntyre, and let me recall my conversation with him. He didn't think it would be a problem because there's only a certain number of outlets that are authorized, right?
Well, yeah, right. The on line 22 of page 2, it talks about in order to be eligible for license to sell this, an applicant shall have been a game operator, employer license under RSA 287D as of May 1st, 2020, and still licensed. So how many licensees are there?
I think there are 15.
Okay.
Now, the question was raised, and I asked the question, why the 3-year limitation?
Right.
And that was there because there's been some discussion about Maine, which isn't happy about this, buying up, okay, and establishing a couple of mega centers with the historic racing. And this 3-year would allow our established people to get us to put this in and to grow it. At the end of that 3 years, they'd be established rather than the already existing historic racing folks coming in and causing, you could call it foreign disruption of the New Hampshire market.
Well,
I'm not normally one that says let's restrict, entrance, but in this case, because that was expressed specifically, I think it's prudent. And this was put in by the last legislature, I believe, when we were discussing it, for that very reason. Senator Daniels.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There was also an organization out in Keene that came in or got organized after the date, so they can't be included, but wanted to be included. So it goes back to changing that date.
So do we want to think of changing it to May of this year or May of, what is it, May of 20 in the bill right now?
Yes.
Could we maybe hear from the Lottery Commission
Yeah, that's a good idea.
about whether they have a track record for that organization? I'm just curious because I'm not familiar with them.
Either way.
Is Val nearby? I don't see her.
Is there anyone from the Lottery Commission here? If so, please raise your hand.
Is there anyone, Rick Newman, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to. I can tell you that the date was, for what you just said, is exactly the reason that the House 2 years ago put that date in. It was originally May 1 of 19, and then it was moved to 20 for this bill. And in fact, in testimony before your committee, you heard Churchill Downs say they were interested in buying up abandoned movie theaters and putting in multiple locations. With regard specifically to the Keene location, yes, I'm aware that one opened up out there. I believe they were licensed in December of this year. In discussions with the lottery is comfortable with the fact that every location that would be eligible under the current bill has been audited at least once, and most of them multiple times, and have successfully been audited, I should say. Whereas that new location, it's only been open now for a couple of months, has never been vetted. They have to get to know them. They don't know anything about them, and they haven't gone through an audit. I would point out there's a second location that did operate in Nashua that actually recently had its license suspended because they weren't operating under the rules. So that's exactly why, that 3 year is there. If you open up a new place, I think the lottery and the regulators want to make sure you're doing what you're doing correctly, you know what you're doing, and you're, complying with all the rules and regulations. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Rick, how many machines?
I recognize Senator Daniels.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How often do these organizations get audited? And when, if, I guess I'm looking for, if somebody wanted to get involved, someone going forward, are they cut out forever? Or do you just have to wait till they're audited and vetted, and then they can join?
I think I would suggest you need at least about a year worth of activity in order to have a body of evidence to be audited. So I would think that within a year or shortly thereafter that, of being in operation, they would see their first audit.
Follow up?
Yes, please.
Can an organization request that an audit be done and they pay for it?
Well, I assume they could. I'm just not sure if you've only been open for 2 months, if there's enough of a track record. You know, when the auditors go in, they really do a deep dive. They go back and look at, making sure, to Senator D'Alessandra's earlier point about making sure that charities are getting their money and making sure rules are being complied with. They look at the video, there's video requirements. They make sure the money's being counted correctly. I just think you probably need a little bit more of a track record than a couple of months to have some comfort level.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Alessandro.
Oh, to Mr. Newman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick, how many machines are we talking about at each location?
There's no limit in the legislation. You're correct about the number of machines. The industry and the lottery have always operated on the theory that probably 1,000 is in the ballpark of how much the market can take. But as you know, Senator, for instance, a location in Manchester will likely have a lot more machines than, say, a location in Berlin or a location in Belmont, just because of the fact of the geography. So I think each location will set its own number.
Right, but there's no limitation.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? I'm not sure what it takes to establish. Okay, go ahead, Senator Rosenwald.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you. The other thing that came up at the hearing was the discussion of possibly adding a local option. And I didn't know if you had conversations with anyone or thoughts on that, or anybody else had.
Representative Almy had contacted me, and I had mentioned that, I think. And so it is something that we may want to consider.
Am I still able to answer that?
Certainly.
I would just point out that when bingo was authorized and the sale of Lucky 7 tickets were authorized in legislation in 1997, there was a local option put in that, but all existing locations were grandfathered. So if you were a town that already had it, you were all set. So I know, for instance, when I was running Belmont had never had bingo. And so I think it was around 2011 or 12 or so, we had to go to the town meeting and ask that bingo be approved, which it was. But a town like a city like Manchester, for instance, that already had bingo did not have to do that. So, that's just something to consider, that these locations were already here. Perhaps future locations, it would make sense to have a local option.
Representative Almy is specifically asking, I believe, on the about the town of Lebanon. I think she represents Lebanon, and they're concerned that the location of the bingo is close to, I'm not sorry, of the facility, not the bingo, would potentially cause harm to people because it's located in a neighborhood where they may be susceptible more to the gambling bug. That was the nature of her request. So but again, I also think that might be a zoning issue as well, and one that's locally dealt with. But again, I'd certainly entertain any suggestions or thoughts from the members of the committee.
Mr. Chair, Representative Almy does have her hand raised.
All right, I can't see that. Please, Sue, please speak.
Thank you so much. The issue in Lebanon is that it never occurred to us that we would need zoning. Representative Abrami continually tells me, well, Salem has zoning, you could have done it too. But we have a lot of people in Lebanon who are pretty upset about the idea that we would have on a machine gambling situation in the middle of our largest density of subsidized elder housing, subsidized on housing for newly for people who were recently homeless. We have a substance abuse shelter and substance abuse recovery housing, all within walking distance, even walking distance with a walker of that. And it is also on the edge of our pedestrian mall, which is the core commercial area of our downtown. And I've had a fair number of people over the years asking me, what's that thing that says it's a casino? Because there's a small sign saying casino, and people occasionally notice it. And I say, that's the Poker Palace. And it was brought in as a Poker Palace 6 months before this bill was first introduced. And the owner of it would like to see those machines there. And it represents, unlike places where they are in commercial areas already, so that you have to drive to it or something like that, it's uniquely available to anybody who has a lot of time on their hands, doesn't have much money to waste, and is lonely, especially with the pandemic, but even later on. I've spent quite a lot of time in our village green on talking with people, and a lot of the people there are there from the senior housing, and they would not be playing poker, but or the other games that require some thought process and also are social. They involve sitting or standing in a group of people and playing together. But they are not games that usually at least attract the elderly. And they are games that go slower usually. So this one is a game that goes quite fast, is a single person playing with a machine, and is therefore more addictive and more likely to cause people without meaning to lose the little money that they've got on their fixed income. And it would be, I mean, we cannot zone after the fact. They are already there. And this is going to be a situation in every town in the state that someone, whether it be the casino in Maine and North Carolina, or whether it be a local operator, can expand to any town, any place in that town, unless all the towns that have zoning that haven't got charitable gaming yet figure out a way to zone charitable gaming off to a section where it requires a little bit more effort to go to. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any discussion from members of the committee? Senator Hennessy.
So just to confirm, we won't be voting on this week. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Yes. All right. Any further discussion? All right. Sonia, do we have any other bills that are executable?
No.
No. All right. We'll move to come out of executive session.
So moved.
D'Alessandro, Hennessy seconds. Senator D?
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. All right, is there any other business to come before the committee? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
D'Alessandro moved, Hennessy seconds. Senator D,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. We are adjourned. Thank you for your work today.
Thank you.